Good morning, students. How are you doing? Good. Okay, today we are going to learn about main idea and key details. So maybe you've heard about main idea and key details in 3rd grade, maybe 2nd grade, even 1st. Today we're going to look at it a little bit differently. So, before we get to that, I want us to read the I can statement, which is right here. I'm going to set it in the middle so everyone can read it. Now I want us all to read it together, okay? Ready?
I can find the main idea of a text and explain how it is supported by key details.
Perfect. Our standard says exactly that. It says determine the main idea of a text and explain how it is supported by key details. Summarize the text. So before we do anything, I want to ask you, do you know what a main idea is? Alyssa? What the story is mostly about. So I have a little reference sheet for you that you can keep. You can use throughout the story that we're going to read today. You could even use on your exit slip that I'm going to give you, but it gives you a little picture of a stool. Now we have a picture just like that behind us of a main idea stool. And at the bottom it says the definition of a main idea and then a definition of supporting details. So I want you to put your name on this and I want you to keep it throughout the year because this can really help you. Alright, now we talked about main idea. Thank you for putting your name on your paper. Thank you. But let's talk about detail. Who knows what the supporting details do for the main idea? Gabby? So it gives us supporting details about that main idea, right? So you took a little assessment a few days ago on dolphins, and the main idea was dolphins are mammals. Well, how do we know that they're mammals? Because they give live birth, because their mothers supply them milk just like us, because we are mammals. And they breathe air. Good job, Jeffrey. So today we're going to read our text found on page 32. I want everyone to turn to page 32. Perfect. Thank you for doing that so quickly. If you don't have room, maybe your friend can scoot down their book a little because I want it close to you because we're going to finger trap. Now, before we get started, we read this book Thursday. We know what happens. We made good guesses of what we think would happen. Some of us really had some great keywords that were like, I don't think he's hunchback. I think he's something else. But today I want to ask you, Philippa had a dream, and her dream was to find the long-lost king. Do you have a dream? Think about it for a second. Do you have a dream? Just like Philippa, she wanted to find this king. What's your dream? Natalie? You don't have a dream yet? Okay. Who has a dream? Yes. What's your dream? You want to help animals around the world. Perfect. That's a great dream. Yes, Jeffrey.
I want to be able to find and live and create shark.
Awesome. A shark. Okay. Anyone else have a dream? Yes, Gabby. The world's biggest shark. That's awesome. Philippa had a same dream. She wanted to do something, and she set out to accomplish it. So my second question is, how can you make sure that you achieve that dream? What is something that you can do? If you want to find a shark, what are steps that you can take to find that shark?
You could maybe choose an ocean to look out first.
Yeah, you can choose an ocean. You can go out on your boat. You can maybe meet with some researchers that know about sharks and animals in the ocean. Yes? Read in the library. You can do research. You can do it in the library. You can do it on the computer. Yes?
I was going to say that step that might help here
Mm-hmm.
because if you want to find, if one of them wanted to find a shark, they could go down deep in the ocean because half of the ocean hasn't been discovered yet.
That's true. So the ocean is vast. It's huge. And maybe you can find your shark.
Especially if they're on the trees.
Mm-hmm. The Mariana Trench. Perfect. All right. So Philippa had a dream. Who remembers what her dream was? And did she accomplish that dream? Natalie? So she found the king, and that was her dream, right? She wanted to. That was her main goal in life. So some of us may not have dreams right now. Some of us may. My dream is to become a teacher. What am I doing to get that dream? I'm teaching you. I'm going to school. I'm doing my research just like you would have to do to find the shark that you want to find. Perfect. Okay, so before we read, let's go over our rules. I'm going to bring them right to the middle so that we can all see them. We went over these Thursdays, so they should be fresh in your brain. All right, so what's rule number 1? Just say it.
Raise your hand to read.
Yes. Rule number 2?
Finger track while reading.
Why should we finger track while we read? So we don't get lost. Jeffrey, is that what you're going to say?
So like when you're called on, you know where you are.
Yeah, so you know where you are. Rule number 3? Participate. That's really important. All of you are participating great this morning because you're answering my questions and you have really good things to say. And then the 4th one?
Whisper voices.
Yes, whisper voices, because we don't want to interrupt the classes around us. Perfect. All right. Well, like I said Thursday, whenever we read it together, that today I'm going to read it to you. All right? So that we can think while we're reading, what is the main idea of this text and what are some important details? After we read, we will fill out this graphic organizer. So we'll have one main idea and 4 supporting details. So while we're reading this text, think, I might write this as a supporting detail. All right, so everyone turn to page 34. Turn to page 34. All right, everyone get your finger ready or your pencil ready to track, okay? All right. Philippa Langley is a woman on a mission. Everyone finger tracking. As a modern-day screenwriter and history fan, Philippa's favorite topic to study is Richard III, one of the most famous kings in England's history. This legendary king, who died over 500 years ago, had quite the bad reputation. Now, we talked about his reputation. Do you think that he was a bad king?
Maybe.
Maybe. Some of us thought, I think he might have been a good king.
Maybe he was like bad one day and good the next.
And good the next. We did talk about that. So a lot of people did not like this king. But Philippa, what did she think?
He was good.
Alyssa? He was a good king. Maybe he was good and people just saw him in a negative light. All right, let's keep going. After his brief 2-year reign and death in 1485, he is remembered for being a cruel killer. William Shakespeare wrote a play about him in 1592 titled Richard III and described him as a cold-hearted, selfish villain. Paintings created after his death portray him with narrowed eyes, which means he looked angry, a hunched back, and even clawed fingers. Now, Olivia, I know that you said maybe he didn't have a hunched back. What did you think he had? Scoliosis, and we found out that he did. And what is scoliosis, Jeffrey?
It's like kind of like a disease you get in your back.
Okay, so your spine is curved, kind of like an S. All right, good job. Let's keep reading. It does. All right, page 35, finger tracking. But Philippa knew that every story has 2 sides. Had Richard III really been the bad guy everyone said? Or did the fallen rulers of England just make him seem that way to make themselves look good? Could Philippa possibly find his missing remains and even clues about the king's real personality so long after his death? Many experts said that locating him would be impossible, but Philippa had a dream to find the long-lost king. Did Philippa find the king? Yes, she did. And she had a dream, just like all of us. Yes. He's wearing clothes like they would wear back in the day, so it doesn't look like clothes that we wear today, does it?
It's like a king.
Yes, kings wore amazing, exquisite attire, and back in the day, they didn't wear long pants. Sometimes they wore these dresses like here, so that's why his legs are showing a lot. All right, let's turn to page 36. Finger tracking with me, okay? Modern scientists can tell a lot about people who lived long ago by studying their remains. However, there was no body or skeleton of Richard III anywhere to be found. Some records said that he was buried in the Greyfriars Church in Leicester, England, after he died at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485. However, some said that his body was removed and thrown into the River Soar after King Henry VI tore down Greyfriars Church. Now, was he thrown? Was he thrown into the river?
No.
Where did they find him?
And the Greyfriars Church.
Parking lot. That's what I was looking for. He wasn't thrown in a river. He was found in a parking lot. All right, let's continue. Philippa Langley is a member of the Richard III Society. This group studies everything about Richard III. They believed he might still be buried at the site of that old church. But where exactly was that? If Philippa could locate where the church used to be, she could dig and hopefully locate his missing, buried bones. All right, we're on 37, finger tracking. Thank you. Philippa raised money and got a license to start an excavation to dig. She hired archaeologists and scientists who found an old map of Leicester. This map showed a possible location of the Greyfriars Church. They laid the old map on top of a current map of Leicester and discovered something. The old church used to sit in an area that was now a parking lot between two office buildings. So it was where the Greyfriars Church was, but now it's a parking lot. All right, let's continue reading. Could the king still be there after all of these years? On September 8th, 2012, Philippa and her team began digging to find out. So we can see in these pictures, this is what was on top of that parking lot now. So there was buildings, there's the parking lot, and then we see his remains that they dug up. All right, page 38. What they found. For 4 days, archaeologists dug 2 long trenches under the surface of the parking lot. Immediately, they found walls and floors of a building that they have once belonged to a monastery, a place where monks lived and prayed. This was exciting since it was said that King Richard III died in battle. Monks took his body away on a horse. So Thursday we talked about monks. They're most famously known for wearing long coats, and what do they do all day? They just pray, yes. So they pray in a church. So they found him, whenever they were digging, they found remains of this building that used to be a monastery. All right, let's continue to the next paragraph. Philippa and her team grew more excited. Their next plan was to find the church inside of the friary, and after that, the choir within the church. If they could find the choir, they would look underneath it, where sources said the remains of the missing king might lay if he were still buried. After only 4 days, one of the archaeologists found something else buried under the choir in an area called the Walking Place. Many years ago, it was tradition for important people to be buried under floor areas where many people walked as a sign of respect. The archaeologists immediately called in more team members to look at it. One of those, Joe Appleby, a bone expert, began removing dirt and made an amazing discovery. A human skeleton was under the floor. Whose skeleton was that? King Richard's, yes. As she worked to uncover it, 2 things made her stare in disbelief. First, the size and shape of the bones. What was the size of the bones? Curved. It was. So that was the shape. It curves kind of like an S in his backbone. But what did they say about King Richard? He was hunchback. He was hunchback. But what about his size? He was tiny, right? So his bones were smaller. Yes. So that's how they knew. Yes, Olivia.
He used to have his back like he has scoliosis.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see how his bones like curve and they go.
Yeah, so they go along with his back because of scoliosis. So not only did his spine curve, but his bones kind of curved with it. All right, let's continue. We're at first the size and shape of the bones in the last paragraph. By looking at the shoulders and pelvis, she could see it once belonged to a human adult male. So he was male. Even more amazing, its spine was curved into the shape of a C in the middle. Whoever the skeleton belonged to, his back was once deformed. Joe Appleby knew that Richard III was rumored to be hunchbacked, so she called Philippa Langley to show her what she had found. So we see the picture on page 39. We see the curve of the back, and we see that it's just tiny. Let's continue. I'll get to you in a second, okay? Page 40. Philippa couldn't believe it. It wasn't certain proof that it was Richard III, but so far, this was great evidence. News got out that skeletal remains had been found under the parking lot. People from everywhere came to see the dig. Over the next few days, the team worked to uncover the fragile bones. Once removed, they were taken to a laboratory for study. In order to prove that these were really the long-lost remains of King Richard III, many tests needed to be done. What no one could expect, however, was just how much the tests would reveal. So let's see what those tests reveal. We already know, but let's go back and let's remember. Page 41. From the moment the skeleton was found, it began providing clues about the man it belonged to. First, scientists can tell how old a skeleton is by using a test called carbon dating. The carbon dating revealed that the person must have died between 1455 and 1540. King Richard III died in 1485, a match. So this was his skeleton. Secondly, closer study of the curved spine showed that the man didn't actually have a hunchback, which is what Olivia said. He had suffered from scoliosis. Scoliosis is a condition that causes a curved spine. So Olivia last Thursday, she goes, I don't think it was hunchback. I think he had scoliosis, because she knew someone that had scoliosis. So that kind of helped her connect the pieces, right, Olivia? One shoulder might lift higher than the other, making the person appear hunchback. Together with reports of Richard III was a hunchback, this was even more amazing evidence. All right, let's continue. Page 42, finger tracking, all right? Next was the skull. There was much damage to it. A large hole in the back clearly had clean cuts around the edges, suggesting that the man had been hit in the head with a very sharp object. They found 8 blows to the head, including a small rectangular hole in the cheek caused by a dagger. Since Richard III died in battle, this would make sense. This also meant something else. Either he lost his helmet in battle, or he rode onto the battlefield wearing his crown instead, making him an easy target. So remember, we looked at the skull, and Gabby, I remember I asked you, what was evidence that this was his skull? What did they find on the skull? Yes. And why do they think he was hit so many times in the head?
Because he was wearing his crown.
Because either he was wearing his crown or he lost his helmet during a battle, right? Perfect. All right, finger tracking, we're underneath the photo. Another interesting fact was that his arm bones were slightly thinner than average for a man, because some historical records say that the king was an excellent fighter despite his thin frame. This made the case even stronger. So we talked about that earlier. His bones were a little smaller than a man's would be because he had a thin frame. The skeleton also helped to put the rumor to rest that one of the king's arms was shorter than the other, a monstrous depiction thanks to Shakespeare's play. So they also found that one of the arms was shorter than the other, because remember we talked about whenever you're hunchback or you have scoliosis, what happens to one shoulder? It tilts up and the other one's down, so it kind of makes you look like one arm is longer than the other, right? All right, we're at the last paragraph on page 42. Let's finger track. We're almost done. Probably the best piece of evidence, though, came from the help of genealogists who studies families and forensic scientists who use DNA to, among other things, match people to their ancestors. DNA is a code of cells which makes up all living things, so we all have DNA. Richard III's ancestors were traced back over 17 generations to 2 descendants alive today in Canada. Scientists were able to match cell samples from the skeleton with cell samples from 2 family members. Let's make sure we're finger tracking. The two DNA strands matched. That proved it. The skeleton found was that of King Richard III of England. Once the king's identity was confirmed, one last specialist was called in. Carolyn Wilkinson, an expert in facial reconstruction. What did Carolyn do? Who remembers? Alyssa?
She basically made sculptures and computers and stuff.
Yes, and what did she use? We're going to talk about it in a second, but what did she use? She measured certain things in his face with his skull. Jeffrey? She did use a computer, but what did she measure on his skull to make sure she made his face perfect? Alyssa?
His cheekbones and his jaw.
His cheekbones and his jaw. So she measured them to make sure that when she created this model, it was going to look very similar. All right, let's keep going.
He looks like a doll in this one.
He does because it's fake. It's fake skin and everything. So we're at Carolyn. So make sure you find Carolyn and make sure you're pointing to it. Carolyn Wilkinson, an expert in facial reconstruction, uses computers to recreate what a dead person might have looked like when they were alive. After measuring the size of the shape of the skull, eye sockets, jawline, and cheekbones, Carolyn was able to get a good idea of King Richard III's appearance. Using this information, she was able to use a computer technology to reconstruct his face. Everyone was astonished to find that he looked very similar to the paintings created of him, with one exception. He would have appeared younger and kinder, not old and mean as the artist had made him. So we looked at these two pictures on Thursday, and what did we say that made it look different? Olivia? So yes, the very first portrait of him was painted, because back in the day, did they have videos? Did they have cameras? No, they didn't. So they had to paint everyone. And what did the text say that made his new remodeled face look different? Gabby? A computer, but look at the picture on the left. He looks mean, doesn't he? What about the right, Gabby? How does he look? Yeah, how does he look different though? Does he look mean or does he look kind of nice? He looks kind of nice. So yes, that was the difference. Is back in the day, they portrayed him as a mean king, but in this one, he kind of looks nice. Next picture. Last page, and then we're going to get ready. So remember, we are trying to find supporting details for this case. Last page. Everyone turn to it. Perfect. Soon afterwards, Philippa and her team ordered a model of the king's head to be made for everyone to see. This will be on display at the Yorkshire Museum in England. There, visitors can gaze upon his face and wonder if the king was as youthful and handsome as his skull seemed to suggest, or if he indeed appeared as a deformed tyrant. Once all tests are over, the king's remains will be buried in a new location where he can be properly remembered. Philippa Langley could not be more pleased. Her dream came true, right? She found the king. She began her search with nothing but a dream and a slim chance of succeeding. But not only did she succeed in finding the monarch's lost remains, she was also able to show how Richard III may not have been the horrible monster his successors made him out to be. Does this prove that the 500-year-old king was not an evil tyrant? Remember we talked about this? Does this evidence prove that he wasn't evil? No, right? Because we wouldn't know unless we were there, right? All right, not really. The truth is, we will never know. But thanks to archaeologists, scientists, and historical reports, we now have a clearer understanding of who King Richard III really was. So the next time you are walking through a parking lot, stop, look down, and close your eyes. You never know what mysteries may lie beneath your feet, waiting to be discovered. All right. I want you to keep your text open because maybe we need to refer back to our text to fill out this chart, okay? So as soon as you get your paper, I want you to write your name on it, and we're going to fill this out together. Hey, make sure you put that away, okay? Make sure you're going to put your name on your paper, and whenever you have your name, I will know that you are ready to go. The day is the 8th, yes.
Today's the
The fair does start today. All right. So, everyone have their name on their paper? Perfect. Natalie, perfect. Alyssa, Raylan, Gabby, Olivia, and Jeffrey. All right. So, what should we start with? Should we start with the details or the main idea? Main idea. Who thinks they know the main idea of this passage? Think about it for a few seconds. What is the main idea of this passage? I like how you're going back to your text. Natalie, what do you think the main idea is? How they found King Richard. Anyone else have a main idea that they think it might be? Jeffrey? Okay, she did accomplish her dream. What is the main idea, though, in the whole passage? Natalie was on it. It is King Richard III, but what about it? Natalie, what did you say again? How they were going out to find King Richard. So on main idea, we're going to say finding King Richard. Was he just King Richard, or was he King Richard the Third? Because there was a few King Richards before him. So there's King Richard, and then there's King Richard the Second, and so he was just the third King Richard. So that means that there's just people ahead of him that have the same name, and they had to make it different. So let's make sure we're writing down that main idea. In your text. Right there. That is how you write the third. Whenever you are done, just put down your pencil so that we know that we can move on. I like how you're going back to your text to make sure you're spelling his name correctly. You're ready to move on, just place your pencil down. Alyssa's ready, Natalie's ready, Raylan, Gabby. All right, we're all ready. So, the main idea is finding King Richard III. Philippa wanted to find him. How did they do it? What's our supporting details? We have 4 that we need. Yes, Jeffrey.
They had to look under a parking lot.
Okay, so number 1. A main detail is they looked under a parking lot, and what did they find under there?
His body.
All right, so they're going to look under the parking lot and find his body. We're saying look under the parking lot to find his body. That's what they did. That's the first supporting detail of finding him. Look under the parking lot and then put they found his body. All right. Awesome. I love your answers and how you gave details even in the supporting. All right. So they looked on the parking lot. They found his body. How did they know it was his body? That can be our next supporting detail, right? Raylan?
The way that they knew it was King Richard III because of the blood test.
All right, so the DNA test, and they found relatives that lived in Canada. So the next one, it can be DNA test. DNA test. No, it doesn't. All right, so they took a DNA test.